Order. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to meeting number 91 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. And pursuant to the order of reference Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023, and the motion adopted on May 16th, 2023, the committee's meeting to discuss Bill C-47, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 28th, 2023. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. And we do have a full room today, and here literally, but also on screen. And we thank all our witnesses. I know it was in with very short notice that you had to kind of pull your opening remarks and together and some of your materials, but we do thank you for doing that for us and for coming before our committee today. You will be the last set of witnesses that the committee will hear on this piece of legislation. So we look forward to hearing your, like I said, opening remarks and your answers to the many questions. So now I'm going to have the opportunity to welcome our witnesses. We have from the Centrale des Syndicats Démocratiques, we have Kevin Bisonnet, who's the vice president with us. Also, the union advisor, Francis Fortier, has joined us. From the Convenience Industry Council of Canada, Anne Kowaltha is Kathawala, I apologize, is with us today. She's the president and CEO. Welcome. From Cosmetics Alliance Canada, we have Darren Thomas Prasnick, who was in my hometown of Mississauga, coming to us virtually. He's the president and CEO. From the Humane Society International Canada, we have Michael Bernard, who's the deputy director of the organization, who's with us. Excuse me. From the Law Society of Ontario. Well, I do have an old friend, Cara Marie O'Hagan. Cara, welcome, and good to see you. I haven't seen you in many years in another life. Here in the room, we've got Frederica Carla Ann is with us, also from the Law Society of Ontario, and Matthew Wiley, who's the Director of Policy. From the Railway Association of Canada, President and CEO, we've got Marc Brazeau. And also we have the Assistant Vice President to Canadian Pacific Railway, Nathan Cato is with us, and Eric Harvey, who's the Senior Counsel of Regulatory for Canadian National Railway Company. And locally, one of our witnesses, we have from the Ottawa Food Bank, Rachel Wilson, who is the CEO of the organization. Welcome. So now we're going to have an opportunity for opening statements. We are going to start with the Centrale des Syndicats Démocratiques, and you'll have up to 5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the invitation. I am here to represent the CSD, but I'm here to present a brief that has been written jointly with three other central organizations, labor unions, the CSN, the FTQ, the CSQ. We together represent more than 1,165,000 workers in all the regions of Quebec in both the public and private sectors. In a joint brief, we present a series of recommendations for the federal government to adjust the plan to the reality of today's work. In our joint submission, we spoke about the complexity and the inadequate aspects of the employment insurance plan. The plan is flawed, inaccessible, and provides an inadequate benefit for Canadians workers. During the pandemic, only 40% of unemployed workers were eligible for benefits. Part-time workers, in particular, struggled to accumulate the hours to qualify for benefits. In terms of seasonal work, we want to get rid of the black hole. Now, you might ask yourself, what is the black hole? That means the weeks between the end of EI benefits and the start of employment. To try to contain the EI black hole, the government introduced temporary rules in 2018 in 13 regions where EI was characterized by significant seasonal economic activity and high unemployment. The government introduced a pilot project which allowed the seasonal workers to have 5 additional benefit weeks for a maximum of 46 weeks. The special measures were scheduled to end on October 28, 2023, but in this budget, there will be an extension to October 2024. For our association, it's very clear that the end of the pilot project would be catastrophic. And despite the many solutions that have been put forward by industry, we have not yet reached a good solution. People who work in seasonal industries have long work weeks during the peak season, and the work is often intensive and strenuous. They support communities that depend on them. There is a fragile economy, and I have to also say that the average week of EI, or the average number of weeks for EI is 16. The average duration of benefits is 17 weeks. They need 16 weeks to qualify. The extra 5 weeks, therefore, do not fill the black hole for the majority of seasonal industry workers unless you reside in an area with an unemployment rate above 16%. We would like to see a universal eligibility rule, which would be some 420 hours or 12 weeks of work, as well as a minimum of 35 weeks to be able to access benefits. And given the fact that the measures for workers in seasonal industries should be amended, we'd like to see the following: allow an additional 15 weeks of benefits for eligible claimants, revise the criterion for selecting claimants who would be eligible. In other words, you reverse the burden of the proof. That is to say, it is the employer's history and the reason for the seasonal layoff. Establish a calculation of the benefit rate on the best 12 weeks of work, regardless of the regional employment rate. And here's something else that's important. The appeals board in the spring of 2019, when the creation of an appeals board to hear EI appeals was first announced, we were very pleased. But 4 years have passed, and there has not been much progress. In Bill C-47, we note that all board members will have part-time status, thus avoiding the difference in members' status, that, part-time versus full-time members. And also C-47 provides for the appeal to be heard in the appellant's region, except in prescribed cases. But there are 2 problems that remain. Bill C-47 does not insist on in-person hearings, and also Section 4302 states that the Chief Appeals Officer is responsible for the day-to-day functioning of the board, will make a report to the Commission. And what we would like to see is that there would be a report being made, not to the Commission in its entirety, but actually to the representatives of the Commission. We want also to see is in subsection 43042 a deletion of through the chairperson of the board, and in subsection 4315.2 we want to see a replacement in the manner chosen by the appellant person. Allow me to say in concluding, People have endured a lockout, a unilateral decision that was made by the employer. And when there are lockouts, they last several months. And during that period of lockout, they do not have access to EI benefits. So that, this is something of note. It's totally out of their control, puts them into a very precarious financial situation, and it's just incredible to my mind. So this is what we have to recommend to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Bissonnette.
And now we'll hear from the Convenience Industry Council of Canada, and I have Ms. Anne Kathawala, please.
Thank you, Chair, and to members of the committee for inviting our association to speak with you this evening. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation ce soir.
Thank you for inviting us this evening.
And I serve as the CEO of the Convenience Industry Council of Canada, CICC. We are the voice of the country's 23,000 local convenience stores, employing more than 200,000 Canadians. Allow me to paint a brief picture of the economic realities facing our local businesses. Over the past 2 years, we have seen our store locations decline by 5%. That translates into 3 convenience stores closing their doors for good every single day. That not only impacts our employees and their families, but it also affects the entire community, particularly in rural and remote areas where we're the only source of essential goods. We are heavily regulated businesses, so the future of our stores in Canada is heavily dependent on smart government policies. We are deeply concerned by the inaction on credit card interchange fees and contraband tobacco in the 2023 budget. In the last 12 months, credit card fees have increased by 55%. These fees represent the second highest cost to Canada's convenience stores, next only to payroll. We also face a double whammy on credit card fees as we pay both an interchange fee on the product sold itself, plus an interchange fee on the tax of that product. This is an issue that our stores have worked with the federal government on since their initial campaign promise to address fees in 2019. Despite years of work on this file, it is now clear that the government has caved to pressure from card networks and financial institutions. Make no mistake, the vast majority of small businesses will be excluded from this policy. Today's announcement doesn't change the fact that the government is allowing credit cards, companies, and banks to force retailers to pay for their credit card loyalty programs. The details of this scheme announced earlier today will help only the smallest micro businesses in Canada and treats most local businesses no different than large corporations like Walmart or Costco. What's worse is that large corporations like those I just mentioned have the negotiating power to demand better rates than small businesses. So we are actually worse off than these major corporations. Any high volume, low margin business will not be able to access this new rate, and even qualifying businesses will see at most a $1,000 return to their bottom line. This is hardly the relief that we were promised. This approach also penalizes our local businesses by asking them to pay for the privilege of being a tax collector for government. 42% of our sales are in tax alone, because convenience stores sell heavily taxed products like gasoline, tobacco, and alcohol. We are further penalized by this short-sighted approach. I'd like to share with you a quote from a local retailer, Jamie Ardle, who is a CICC board member and with Ontario-based Little Shortstop, on today's announcement. This announcement is very disappointing as a small convenience retailer because I won't qualify, plain and simple. The government promised to address this issue, but didn't deliver. During the pandemic, I kept our stores open despite a massive decrease in sales, and it would have been nice to see government acknowledge the essential role we play in communities by reducing our second highest cost of doing business. C47 presented an opportunity for the government to make good on their promise and do much more to rectify these punitive fees on our businesses. Instead, the government has caved to pressure from card networks and financial institutions, leaving local businesses like ours holding the bag. While the government missed the mark today, there are other steps they can take to help our stores on interchange fees, namely removing the interchange fees charged on the HST, GST portion of the sale. The The government could also fix rates for fuel purchases made by credit cards to 10 cents, which is in line with utilities payments, and I'm happy to speak to either of these proposals in the Q&A. I would be remiss not to mention another area of inaction in C47, which is on the issue of illegal, untaxed tobacco. The proliferation of contraband contributes to organized crime and results in millions of dollars lost tax revenue for governments annually. Federal leadership is needed on this issue, which was once contained to central Canada, but now is a national problem. Members, as you can see, there are no shortage of challenges facing our businesses. We strongly urge that the budget be further strengthened by revisiting the approach to interchange fees and by dedicating resources to addressing the long-standing issue of illegal tobacco, both of which impact our stores nationally. I look forward to answering any questions you may have and discussing solutions with you to these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kathawala. And now we'll hear from the Cosmetics Alliance Canada, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and certainly a privilege to appear before this committee. And several of the members I've known for some time, and some Mr. Blake, I knew his father a long time ago when I was in Manitoba, so a delight to be here. I'm in a rather an enviable situation in that my colleague, Michael Bernard from Humane Society International, who's in the room, we are here somewhat together. Since probably 2018, 2019, our organizations, along with a larger group of stakeholders, including Cruelty for International and the Animal Alliance of Canada, we representing industry, and Mr. Bernard with the Humane Society International, we have been able to come together to reach an agreement on principles for the implementation of a ban on cosmetic animal testing in Canada. And we were able to come together basically on three principles. One, that it would mirror the ban in the European Union. Two, that it would be implemented within the context of the Canadian regulatory framework for these products. And thirdly, that it would actually be drafted by Health Canada and advanced by the government so that it was sure not to have any unintended consequences, that the regulator would be ensure that it would be workable, and that we could come together and all advance it, of course, as a government bill. We're pleased to say that about 2 years or so ago, we were able to get all those details worked out. We worked with Health Canada officials in drafting the principles. They shared with us, following the introduction of the bill in the budget bill, these provisions for amending the Food and Drug Act. They have shared with us the details. We've had a chance to meet with the minister's office, hear the legal staff, and together, Mr. Bernard we have a joint letter we've provided to the committee, which he'll be sharing with you and reading, that we've been able to come together, industry and animal advocacy groups, to advance this particular cause. So we're quite proud of that, and we would certainly commend the inclusion and passage of these important amendments in the Food and Drug Act through this particular bill. So we're not coming here as adverse stakeholders. In fact, we've been working very closely together, the whole group of us, for some time with Health Canada to see these amendments. I would be remiss, though, if I just didn't mention one piece of this puzzle that we are still hoping will come to the attention of Health Canada, and that is Canada's a major exporter of cosmetic products to China. And China, for some years, has been one of the only countries in the world that has specifically required animal testing on cosmetic products that are imported into China. After much lobbying by international industry, they amended their regulations and they provide an exemption to that unnecessary animal testing if those imported products have a government-issued GMP certificate. Well, regrettably, most governments don't issue that. So we approached Health Canada a couple of years ago. We worked with their officials. We developed a potential program that would allow for our dozen or so exporting manufacturers in Canada to take advantage of that. And we thought we had worked through all the details. All of these facilities are currently inspected by Health Canada with either a drug establishment license or a natural health product site license, or are ISO certified. And we thought we would get it. However, Health Canada sort of said, well, not our problem. Well, if not your problem, whose is it? And currently those products are being exported to China with a kind of a Band-Aid solution that the governments of Quebec and of Ontario had offered. So we hope, we wanted to just flag that today, despite the good intentions of the bill, all the work, the commitment that's there, there's still this piece that we need Health Canada to address. Granted, it is administrative, but we wanted to flag it with the committee today. Mr. Chair, my colleague, Mr. Bernard, as I said, we worked very closely together on this, and we're very glad. It's taken some years. We appreciate COVID has made it taken time and delayed the drafting and presentation of this legislation, but I think jointly we all strongly recommend it to the committee that it be approved as part of the budget bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Prasnik, and I guess you'll pass the baton over to your colleague who's here from the Humane Society International Canada, and Mr. Bernard, please, for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much to the Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to provide comments on Bill C-47, specifically the proposed amendments of the Food and Drug Act pertaining to cosmetic animal testing. I am the Deputy Director of Humane Society International Canada, part of Humane Society International, which has a presence in more than 50 countries, making us one of the largest animal protection organizations in the world. Our organization has been working for a decade in Canada to achieve these historic measures for the animals, so we are absolutely delighted to see that Canada is moving forward with this critical legislation. I'm also very proud to co-represent with Darren a coalition of industry, animal protection, and retail companies that have been working together for the past few years to build alignment and consensus on the principles of this legislation. We have sent a letter of support for this legislation to the committee by email, but unfortunately, due to time constraints, I was informed there was not enough time to have it translated before these proceedings. So I would like to take the opportunity to read the letter into the official record. The letter was dated May 17th, 2023. Dear Chair and committee members, we are writing to you today to convey our full support for a ban on cosmetics animal testing as proposed in Bill C-47. Who we represent, a broad consensus of industry, animal advocates, and retailers. The collective of our organizations represents a broad range of stakeholders, including the cosmetics industry, 150 plus companies represented by Cosmetics Alliance Canada, animal protection advocates, Humane Society International Canada, Animal Alliance Canada, and our retail partners, Lush Cosmetics, Cruelty Free International and retail partners, The Body Shop. Since this issue was first raised in Parliament through a private member's bill in Senate in 2015, our group of key stakeholder organizations have been working together and with Health Canada to advance workable legislation. This legislative language in Bill C-47 pertaining to the ban on cosmetic animal testing is consistent with the policy approach that our group has long been advocating for in discussions with Health Canada. That a Canadian ban align with the principles of the EU ban and the necessary amendments be drafted by Health Canada to ensure they work within the Canadian regulatory context. We are thrilled to see this legislation introduced and look forward to seeing it passed without issue into law. Of note, Canada will be hosting the 2023 Animal Alternatives World Congress on August 23rd to 27th, 2023 in Niagara Falls, Ontario. Government, industry, and other stakeholders will be participating in this important international event. This will be an ideal opportunity to highlight Canada as a leader in the development of animal testing alternatives and banning of unnecessary animal testing on cosmetic products. This letter was signed by representatives that I mentioned earlier. So what will this legislation do? This legislation would prohibit testing cosmetics on animals in Canada, selling cosmetics that rely on new animal testing data to establish the product's safety, with some exceptions, and false or misleading labeling pertaining to the testing of cosmetics on animals. These measures would bring Canada into line with 43 countries that have already introduced similar bans or restrictions, including the United Kingdom, European Union, India, South Korea, Taiwan, New Zealand, Australia, and many others. In addition, 10 U.S. states have also enacted bans, and further federal measures are in development in the U.S. and elsewhere. And of course, there's tremendous public support for these measures here in Canada. In 2018, a public petition with over 630,000 Canadian signatures supporting the ban on cosmetic animal testing was delivered to Parliament Hill. Polling conducted in 2019 by Insights West found that 87% of Canadians support a ban on cosmetic animal testing for cosmetic products. It is important to note that modern non-animal methods are available for testing cosmetic safety issues and have been shown to better predict human responses in the real world than animal tests they replace. So there's simply no need for cosmetic animal testing in this day and age. This legislation and the history of this campaign truly shows the great things that can happen when government, political parties across all party lines, industry, the nonprofit sector, and the public work together to create a better future. Thank you again to the committee and all parliamentarians and senators for coming together on this important issue.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bernard. And I'm going to take that virtual baton I talked about and pass it to a former colleague of mine, Cara Marie O'Hagan from the Law Society of Ontario.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's nice to see you again. I'm here with my colleague Matthew Wiley from the Law Society of Ontario, and we are speaking to the new mandatory disclosure provisions in Bill C-47. I'd like to start with a few words about the Law Society of Ontario and the obligations of our members. The Law Society regulates almost 70,000 lawyers and paralegals in the public interest. We protect the public in part by setting and enforcing standards of ethical conduct for lawyers. Lawyers have duties to keep client information confidential, to protect the client's privilege, to avoid conflicts of interest with their clients, and avoid assisting the client in dishonest or illegal conduct. These duties, along with the legal protection afforded to solicitor-client privilege, allow for the free and frank exchange of information between lawyers and their clients. And, most importantly, they enable lawyers to serve as safeguards in the legal system. Clients can seek legal counsel with the benefit of full disclosure, and in response, the lawyer provides advice that ensures that the bounds of the law are protected and adhered to. This dynamic is undermined by the proposed amendments to the mandatory disclosure rules in the Income Tax Act. As you are aware, the proposed amendments significantly broaden the instances in which lawyers would be required to report to the CRA on certain client transactions, and they impose new reporting requirements on lawyers. The amendments could impact a significant number of transactions conducted daily in large and small law offices across the province. In many cases, the amendments could work like this. The lawyer provides advice that the transaction, the one that the client is engaged in, is compliant with the Income Tax Act. But then the lawyer could be required to report the transaction to the CRA, so the CRA can then challenge the lawyer's conclusion after the fact and to the detriment of the lawyer and the client. If lawyers do not report, they and their clients can face very significant penalties. In our view, these amendments are counterproductive to the overall goal of encouraging compliance with the requirements of the Income Tax Act. If these amendments are adopted, clients may fear that their lawyers will report confidential information to the CRA. They may well avoid the essential step of seeking legal advice to determine whether their proposed course of action is, in fact, compliant. Or they may withhold information that prevents the lawyer from providing the proper legal advice. In either case, the taxpayer will not have the benefit of a lawyer properly advising them on their existing reporting obligations in the legislation. Although we do recognize the protection afforded to solicitor-client privileged information in the proposed amendments, the extent of the privilege is uncertain and, in our view, is not a solution in this situation. We are also concerned about the constitutional validity of the new proposed mandatory disclosure provisions. In the case of Canada versus the Federation of Law Societies, The Supreme Court found as a principle of fundamental justice that the state cannot impose duties on lawyers that undermine their duty of commitment to their client's cause. The court said that this duty is essential to maintaining confidence in the integrity of the administration of justice. The proposed amendments require lawyers to report to the CRA on their clients' transactions, so the CRA can then scrutinize the transactions for impropriety. This requirement imposes an obligation on lawyers to act contrary to their commitment to their client's cause. The Law Society of Ontario offers two proposals for the committee to consider as fixes to these significant concerns. Our preferred solution is to amend the definition of advisor under Section 68 and 69 of Bill C-47 to specifically exempt legal professionals from the reporting requirements when they are acting in their capacity as legal counsel. The second option would be to maintain the relieving rule for lawyers so that lawyers' compliance with the reporting requirements could be established by the lawyer advising their client of the obligation to report the transaction to the CRA. I'd be happy to provide further details about these solutions in the Q&A. Those are my remarks. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hagan, and there will be plenty of time during the Q&A. We're going now to the Railway Association of Canada for opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci de nous avoir invités.
Thank you for inviting us.
And Liberal candidate in Manitoba, Mary Jane Bennett, said that, and I quote, "Interswitching is inefficient. It wouldn't correct problems with the supply chain. It would amplify them. Each switch adds to transit time. The more switches you do, the bigger the slowdown. The more you handle a car, the longer it takes to get moving. This measure undermines the capacity, the efficiency, and the fluidity of Canada's supply chains and will harm all shippers. In fact, this measure was tried in 2014 and 2017 and failed. Extended interswitching adds, on average, 1 to 2 days to rail transit times. It was abandoned by this government after an independent statutory review of the Canada Transportation Act. This government's transport minister at the time, Marc Garneau, acknowledged the policy was always meant to be temporary. Nothing has changed that would justify going back to extended interswitching. Let's review why extended interswitching was sunset. First, lack of reciprocity in the U.S. Regulated interswitching does not exist in the United States. Under the government's proposal, U.S. railways will be able to solicit Canadian traffic at cost-based rates without any reciprocity for CKPC, CPKC, and CN, and do the same in the U.S. That means fewer available carloads for Canadian railroaders to move across Canada. It may also mean less available work for port workers if shipments end up in Seattle rather than Vancouver, for example. These are good-paying, overwhelmingly union jobs. The combined network of CN and CPKC exceeds 60,000 kilometers of track. CN and CPKC have 27,000 employees based in Canada. U.S. Railways' Canadian presence is mainly incidental, with just a few hundred kilometers of track. Pourquoi le Parlement devrait-il...
Why now should Parliament direct Canadian Railways internationally to deal directly with the American Railways?
The Minister of Transport Canada told Parliament in 2017 that extended regulated interswitching was, I quote, having unintended consequences on the competitiveness of our railways vis-a-vis the U.S. railways. Long-haul interswitching was the government's much consulted response. Now the government wants to resurrect a policy it already recognized as a failure. The second reason for sunsetting was the non-compensatory rate. Bill C-47 will force Canadian railways to move traffic, sometimes in their own direction, and always at below market rates. The 2016 review found that below market rates were inappropriate because they hurt railways' ability to reinvest in their networks. Everything we purchase is at market rates, from buying steel to paying salaries. Railways cannot be the only parts of our supply chains that aren't operating at market rates. The Transport Minister's office and the National Post this morning acknowledged that extended interswitching creates congestion. They've admitted that that's why they're not doing it in Ontario, Quebec, or British Columbia. The fact that this measure will only apply in the 3 prairie provinces proves that this is not evidence-based supply chain policy. The National Supply Chain Task Force never consulted railways on interswitching before its final recommendation. Canadian grain shippers already pay some of the lowest freight rates in the world. To move 1 ton of grain 1 mile in Canada, it costs on average just 2.97 US cents. Our Class 1 railways both set historical records for grain movements this past year. This was made possible by a combined $1 billion investment in new grain hopper cars built in Hamilton, Ontario, and tens of billions of dollars of investment in capacity and technology over the last decade. An independent study conducted this past January by CPCS found that Canadian freight rates are the lowest among market economies. In fact, 11% lower than the U.S. These rates support the competitiveness of Canadian railway shippers. Extended regulated interswitching is a cure in search of a disease. There is no justification for market intervention, particularly through a policy as egregious and ill-advised as extended regulated interswitching. La décision du gouvernement.
The decision by the government to eliminate that policy was the right one on the basis of fact and proof.
Government's solution to the problems with extended regulated interswitching. The former is based on market rates for comparable traffic, and the latter is a below-market regulated rate. What those asking for this policy want is a cheaper rate. It is not about improving service, nor is it about improving competitiveness. Extended interswitching will do the exact opposite. The only winners will be extended regulated interswitching are U.S. railways. To limit the harm to Canadians, Division 22 must be amended or deleted entirely. We're asking at minimum that rates be market-based and applicable to Canadian origins and destination. You'll find more details in our brief. Mr. Chair, it is collaboration and not more economic regulations that move supply chains. We'll be happy to take questions, my colleagues and I from CN and CPKC.
Merci, Monsieur Brazeau.
Thank you, Mr. Brazeau.
And now we're going to hear from the Ottawa Food Bank. Ms. Wilson, please.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Wilson, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of the Ottawa Food Bank. At the Ottawa Food Bank, we don't talk about solving hunger. Hunger is solved with a meal. Our network of 112 emergency food programs across the city deal with the symptoms of poverty every single day. It should come as no surprise to anyone that there are simultaneous healthcare, affordable housing, and food security crises. They are deeply linked. That is why we support comprehensive policies that address the underlying issues of poverty in our country. Today, I'm here to discuss the grocery rebate. While any additional money that goes back into the pockets of our clients is crucial, this rebate alone will not bring significant change. It doesn't go far enough. The most a family will receive is $467. To put things into perspective in Ottawa, the cost of maintaining a healthy diet is a staggering $1,088 for a family of 4 per month, according to the Ottawa Public Health 2022 Nutritious Food Basket. I listened to my colleagues from the Greater Toronto Area last night share the perspective from their community. This is not a big city problem. There are food banks in every community right across this country. Here in Ottawa, the nation's capital, we are the 5th largest food bank in the country. Last year, 1 in 7 households in Ottawa reported experiencing food insecurity, a significant increase from 1 in 15 just 5 years ago. This year, we saw an 86% increase over visits since March of 2019. These are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are families and individuals and seniors and children. I share these numbers with you, but I wonder what impact they will make. We saw food bank client numbers rise by 28% following the 2008 recession, and those numbers never came back down. The numbers are rising now by 30%. Is that enough of people struggling in our country? 37% of the clients we serve at the Ottawa Food Bank are children. What number of children is enough? Is it 40%? Is it 50%? Does half our city need to be food insecure before we take any meaningful action? What more needs to happen before we decide to take the necessary steps to ensure that every Canadian has food and a house? I want you to think about the entire province of British Columbia, around 5.4 million people. Imagine the entire province going without food for days. I want you to think about the health impacts that would have, the loss of productivity, the impact on the economy, what that would mean for children and their learning. That is what is happening right now in our country. There are almost 7 million people in Canada who are food insecure. If an entire province was shut down because people were not able to eat, we would declare a crisis immediately, and I'm confident every effort would be made to support those who are impacted. If I sound dramatic or over the top, I assure you I am not. I have worked at the Ottawa Food Bank for 7 years and have never had to make the kinds of decisions we are making today about who gets food and who goes without. I urge you to see this as a nonpartisan issue. Food banks in Canada have been around for 40 years and we have seen every type of government come and go, and yet food banks remain and continue to fill the gap left by the government policy. What legacy does this government want to leave? The Ottawa Food Bank is ready to partner with you to eliminate food insecurity and poverty in our community by ensuring policy that prioritizes the most vulnerable, including continued investment in Canada Child Tax, the expansion of the Canada's Workers Benefit, a minimum income floor for all Canadians, and policy that encourages the construction of affordable housing. As you've heard from my food banking colleagues across the province, our resounding message is clear. Food banks are no longer a stopgap measure. We have been a lifeline in the face of every crisis. Our communities look to us for support and hope in their time of need. What they need from you are solutions and policy that help everyone thrive. I urge you, each of you, to consider the voices of those who are most affected by poverty and food insecurity, and I urge this committee to recognize the pressing need for income-based systemic solutions that address chronic poverty levels in all of our communities. Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, and thank you to all our witnesses for your opening statements. And I'm sure the members are eager to ask you many questions, and we do have many witnesses, members. So, just in case, you might want to point your question to whatever witness that you want to address it. We are starting with the first round, and each party will have up to 6 minutes of questions. We're starting with the Conservatives. I have MP Chambers is up first for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wilson, thank you for your testimony. I know you watched our testimony last night. We covered a lot of ground with your peers. One of the things we did ask them was, and we don't want to create work for an organization that is likely understaffed and overworked, but if you had some statistics just in terms of what you're seeing in terms of some of your clients to share, and not to disclose now, but if you had like a monthly report or something that you already do, we would appreciate receiving that.
We would be happy to submit. We do a hunger count every single year that clearly identifies those who are accessing food banks and the reasons of why they're accessing food banks. I can tell you briefly that this year we've seen a significant increase in the number of two-parent families that are accessing food banks, and the number of people who are employed has increased by 37% over last year. So we continue to see families, individuals, seniors, people from all walks of life who are accessing food banks, and we'd be happy to submit a report that indicates that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just move on. I know some of my colleagues also have some questions for you who weren't with us last night, so I want to leave them the opportunity to come back to you. Ms. Kothwala, I want to talk a little bit about credit cards, which is a topic we always bubbles back up every few years. I know for your members, it's probably an ongoing issue, but it always gets brought to the fore. You made a couple comments about 42, I just want to unpack them a bit. 42% of the revenue of your members, did I get that right, is actually taxes that it then remits to government?
That is correct.
Okay.
And again, it's because a number of the products that we sell are highly taxed products. So gasoline, tobacco, Unfortunately, we can only sell beverage alcohol in a few provinces, but in the province of Quebec, these are all highly taxed products.
Right. And the profit margins on these highly taxed products are obviously, without giving confidential information away, I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that they're quite low.
They're very low. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions, particularly on the gasoline side. So that's why, that's one of the examples we've used, that currently when you go to a gas station, let's say it's a $60 fill up, it's roughly $1.20 in processing fee if you fill up your car with gas. If you go to the same station and they have an EV charging ability, it would be a 10-cent flat fee. Why? Because it's treated as a utility. So that's one of the areas that we think could, some progress could be made in recognizing that the retailing of fuel is not what people think it is. The profit margins, as you point out, are extremely low. In fact, in Atlantic Canada, where the price of gas is regulated, we had retailers in Atlantic Canada that were literally losing money.
And I assume that's what is partially driving you. You also mentioned another sobering stat, 5% of your stores closing or your member stores closing. Was that over a year or what?
That was over the course of 2 years. And so the last time we carried that, where we surveyed our members and looked at the data, that's why we said it's the equivalent of 3 stores closing over the course of 2021, because this is information from our report last year. So we're in field right now to determine what the 2022 numbers will be. And we suspect they'll be even worse. And that's based on reports that we're getting back from our members. And I think the one thing that's really important to point out is that the disproportionate amount of closures are actually happening in rural communities across this country, where the local convenience store or gas station is often the only game in town.
You also, so you mentioned this utility issue. So to me, it just seems like a matter of fairness, right? So the government is benefiting obviously from the sale of these products, highly taxed products. We've asked the retailer to remit, but there's basically a fee to collect it and remit it, which fee has to then be paid from the profit margins on the rest of the goods in the store, because the profit margins on that $60 of gas is probably only $1.20, or it's quite a small number, right?
It's quite small.
They're actually having to,
yeah.
So is it fair? Is it fair to say your members have to sell more of other things just to basically pay a transaction fee to collect the tax, send it to the government? Is that about?
That is a very fair assessment. And that's why, again, convenience stores are very unique. I know the announcement took place at a bookstore, a small independent bookstore. Lovely business, but it's very unlike a convenience store because of the nature of the products that they sell that are not highly taxed. So our simple argument to government is we should not have to pay for helping government with their job to collect taxes.
Right. And then just final question. You mentioned the fees being the second largest expense only to
labor.
Salaries, I believe. Labor.
That's correct.
So even more than rent?
Yes.
Even more than rent? Okay.
And that is something that we have seen as a result of over the course of the pandemic. As many of us may recall, at the beginning of the pandemic, people stopped using cash. In fact, some retailers didn't accept cash because we still didn't know enough about the nature of COVID. And so the contactless payments have gone through the roof. So they've increased by 55%. So rent used to be the second biggest cost of doing business for a convenience retailer. That has now been overtaken by credit card fees.
Thank you very much. I want to be fair to all of my other colleagues. I think we're a little over time. Apologies, Mr. Chair.
All good. Thank you, MP Chambers. And now we're going to hear from the Liberals. MP Chattel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Wilson, for your testimony. We heard other food bank earlier this week. It's a heartbreaking story. I'm part of the National Capital Region. I'm in the Pontiac, just the other side of the river. I have over 10 organizations delivering or trying to ensure food security at the time of crisis. I know it has been very hard for people in my riding. I have amongst the poorest, what we call MRCs, so groupment of municipalities in the whole Quebec region. So times are hard with the inflation crisis. I was talking to colleagues in the UK or working in charities where they are experiences an inflation of above 10% in the UK, and prices of housing were already really, really high. Things are really hard. We have tried to make life more affordable for Canadian. We had the grocery benefit that we have. Hopefully, that helps some of the most vulnerable. We now have the dental benefit. We know for children especially, going to the dentist is not affordable for many. So hopefully that helped with that. Students too are amongst the most vulnerable. I don't know in Ottawa, but I suspect a lot of students are showing at your door. So we help them by eliminating interest saving. Small business, we are lowering the credit card fees as well. Predatory lending. Some family resort to some lending and then they're charged astronomous amount of interest that they can't repay, keeping them into poverty. We have the workers' benefit now at $2,400, benefiting 4.2 million. The child care also make life more affordable. We have indexed to inflation a lot of the benefits. So overall, we have lifted 2.7 million Canadians out of poverty since 2015. By the way, all measures, except one, the Conservative voted no. So when they say they care about the situation of poverty in Canada, I just don't believe it at all. But what I wanted to ask is additionally what we've done in the budget is to help with bank directly. We had 50 million surplus food rescue program and 200 million emergency food security fund. So can you tell us how these two programs helps you?
Absolutely. So those were very beneficial during COVID. We distributed funds out to our network of 112 agencies. Most of them actually used it for either purchasing of food or for staffing. We did lose a lot of volunteers during COVID, and staffing really are critical for us to be able to help people move out of poverty. Food banking has really expanded and become much more of a professional industry than it ever has been, relying on well-trained, skilled people to help access supports and resources for people. But unfortunately, those funds have completely been spent. There is no money left from what we received. So we are back to serving more people. And unfortunately, the cost of groceries has gone up so high. Even we as an organization are spending more and not able to put out as much as we used to. Before the pandemic, we were spending $1.4 million on food. This year, we'll spend well over $6 million, getting close to $7 million. We were a $15 million organization before the pandemic. We are now a $25 million organization. And that is partially because of the cost of everything and the increased number of people who are accessing food banks.
And how about the I know in my writing, which is very important, is the collaboration with groceries to have what we call the invendu, so food that is not being sold. And the partnership over the years have improved, but there's a lot of room to be done still in collaborating. So is there more to be done with other businesses that could help and could contribute to the well-being of our communities?
Here in Ottawa, we are one of the largest recoverers of food in the province. So we do a significant amount of food recovery with grocery stores. All of the major chains participate with us. We're very grateful for their support, but we really would prefer that the food banking system just did not exist at all. And we would prefer to go away completely and allow people to purchase food at grocery stores, choosing what is most appropriate for them and their family, purchasing it when and where they want.
Mm-hmm. There's a bit of a good news on the inflation rate, but food is still very high at the grocery, depending on the item. And what happened too is that some of the families are resorting sometime to buy products that are not fresh or not good, or fast food, unfortunately, could be cheaper. I know families going to the dollar store sometime to buy food for their children. So what else do you see as a program that could really help you?
We see that a lot, is that people are doing their grocery shopping at the dollar store. And, you know, I make the example often, it's not as valid anymore, but it used to be that you could buy a hamburger at a fast food restaurant for about $1, or you could buy an apple. And most families will, in precarious situations, choose the hamburger because it will fill them up more. But it's often low nutritional, not high quality food. Food banks like ours and right across the country are investing significant dollars in purchasing fresh items. Those are the most expensive items. We spend $60,000 a month on eggs alone. We also spend about $30,000 a month on milk because we know families can't afford them. So when they come to a food bank, we give them a high quality, high nutritional items so that any money they do have, they can buy the less items just to help bulk up.
Merci, and thank you, MP Chattel. And now we're going to the block for questions, and MP Samari, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, thank you to all our witnesses for coming here on short notice on a Thursday evening. I'm very impressed to see so many here in person around the table. It's very much appreciated. There's a lot of information in all the presentations that we've heard. We won't have the time, each of us as elected members, to ask each of you questions, but please know that we are taking note of your presentations. Of course, Ms. Wilson, it's just overwhelming what you are telling us. And your colleagues yesterday from other food banks described situations that were really catastrophic. So I want to thank you as well as them for all the work that you do. Thank you. We want the situation to change. And with respect to yesterday, it reminds us how important it is to have a social net, a safety net there. For Ms. Kawala, we're very aware of the difficulties that you face, and we continue to listen to you and bring forward your claims, not just with respect to the budget, but with respect to effective change overall. My time is limited. I'm going to ask some questions for Mr. Fortier and for Mr. Bissonnette. Thank you for being here. You represent the CSD. That is a regrouping of the CSN and two other major unions. Your principal point is that things aren't, the EI fund doesn't work as it stands. It needs to be modernized. Can you give us more information about this? Well, yes. I do represent most of the large labor unions in Quebec, and we want to simplify the rules for eligibility and for accessing EI. We go back to square one. As I said from the outset, with respect to accessibility, it's just not working. People are being penalized. Women, people who work part-time, they don't get enough hours or weeks to qualify. And it's not through pleasure or choice that people do that type of work. It's because they are in situations, life situations, where they have to work in that manner, as you said yourself. We're in a beautiful country, Canada, a big country. We want to be able to revitalize our regions, but in the regions, seasonal work is sometimes the only work that is available. Those people work intensively. They work hard for a shorter period of time, perhaps, but then they find themselves in the hole, in the black hole, because they don't have enough hours or weeks. Well, what's their choice? Leave the region and go to a major urban center? Is that the spirit behind this legislation? The EI Act was intended to be a social legislation, a piece of social legislation to give access to people who needed it and who were in the regions. This is, I'm telling you, the whole thing has become a mountain now, an inaccessible mountain that is not modern. Thank you. Well, it only covers maybe 4 out of 10 people who lose their job, and that's something that's terrible. What really irritates me is that for all sectors, the government is there, but for in this instance, the government's putting its hand in the pockets of workers, particularly with respect to recovering monies paid out during the pandemic. How much time do I have left? 2 minutes left? 2 minutes? Okay, it's all good. All good. Excellent. In C-47, the government extends by a year its pilot project for the targeted zones. Is that going to suffice? No. It's good that it's going to be extended by 1 year, but it's going overall still to be catastrophic. It has to be standardized. It has to be improved. Okay, I'll ask you questions in my next round.
Oh, MP Saint-Marie? Fini?
Are you finished, Mr. Saint-Marie? Yes.
And now we're going to the NDP and MP Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. I just want to echo the thank yous that have already been made to our witnesses, both for the work that you do, in particular to our witnesses from the food banks who have really been doing an extraordinary work over the last number of years to serve people in distress, and also for being willing to appear on short notice. I know this has been a kind of difficult process in that way. I do want to ask Mr. Brazeau, Cato, and Harvey. We've heard a fair bit from Pulse and grain grower associations around the table on interswitching. We've heard a few different things. We've heard that their intention isn't really to use American Railways at all, that they just want to enhance their bargaining position. We've also heard that in their view, because in Canada, Canadian crews are required, that means that we're going to see, if there is interswitching, unionized crews in Canada carrying goods on short lines, which I wonder if you may have some comment about that. We've also heard that they would expect that a significant amount of public investment in short line infrastructure in order to make use of the interswitching that they say is for better bargaining. I'm just wondering if you might help kind of zero in on which claims you think are consistent with the way that rail freight works and where there may be some discrepancies.
Thank you for your question, and thanks for this invitation to speak today. We appreciate the time you're giving us in your question. On the use of U.S. railways, the only thing we can say about it is that in 1417, U.S. railways were used, and interswitching was used to move traffic to the U.S. There is no doubt about it, and it's significant. It's not just a detail, it's significant volumes. On cruise and short lines, I must say that I think I understand this kind of chain reaction between interswitching to the point where, but I would certainly say that before you get there, my sense is that the better approach is to hold on the jobs we have now and which are moving traffic, which are the Canadian jobs that we have already in place. Most of the traffic that we move goes to market. I mean, it goes to Vancouver for export, Rupert, East Coast, and that traffic moves long haul with our employees moving that traffic long haul. Developing a policy that would detract from this to focus on the short move would certainly be a bit challenging at times in terms of its implementation. And frankly, I think it would reduce capacity in the supply chain if you focus, the resource there instead of, on the long haul. So for us, really, and I want to insist on this because, Mark in his opening remarks has indicated that we have many employees in this country, we have large investments, and while for which there's no comparison with any U.S. operator in this country. So we do this with an expectation of a return, which I think is a legitimate expectation considering that every party in the discussion are business entities and that what we're trying to achieve is essentially providing an efficient service to all our customers to which we have a level of service obligation. So for that reason, and bearing in mind that the traffic that goes to the U.S. is the most damaging because suddenly we lose the revenue, our employees lose the work. So for us, frankly, suggesting that there would be some form of compensation through employees and short lines is not something that certainly is obvious to us.
So I think, normally when we think about supply chain efficiency, there's at least three categories that jump off the page. You'd think, okay, if we're going to have a more efficient supply chain, we're either going to lower our capital costs, we're going to lower our labor costs, or we're going to lower the amount of time that it takes to move product. How does interswitching fare on any of those three metrics?
Interswitching is not an efficient way to move traffic. To use the example of the air mode, we all know that a direct flight is always more efficient than a stopover, let's say, from Calgary, Toronto, Ottawa, or Winnipeg in your case, for example. So interswitching to some degree is similar to this. Instead of having, if I take the example of traffic originating on CN moving to Vancouver, we take the traffic on our lines and we move it all the way to Vancouver on our lines. If we have to interswitch the traffic, what happens is that the traffic originating on CN will be given to CP at an interchange using CP equipment. So what you have is CP bringing us empty cars. We bring the empty cars at the origin. We bring back at the interchange the loaded cars, and then CP picks them up to move them to Vancouver. So in normal circumstances, our best estimate there is that you add certainly 1 to 2 days of transit time. And at the scale of our operation, if you start increasing transit times, you're cutting capacity to the point you're making. Everything is essentially, and grain is a good example because more and more we're moving grain in unit trains, which are very efficient moves. We have very good agreements with our customers about that, commercial agreements. And frankly, yep.
Yeah, because I know we'd go way over if we continue. And members and witnesses, I just want to let you know, a notice of meeting did go out, and it had the list of witnesses. One of the witnesses was not captured that came in kind of late into this, and that is we have her with us here today. So Ms. Frederica Wilson, I apologize. I did not recognize you under the Federation of Law Societies of Canada. So members and witnesses, if you'll indulge just for a minute or two, just let the members know who you are and who you represent, and then we'll get back right into our second round of questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak briefly. I work for the Federation of Law Societies of Canada. We are the national association of the provincial and territorial regulators of the legal profession, of which the Law Society of Ontario is one. The fact that we are here, as well as the Law Society of Ontario, is a testament to the seriousness with which we see the issues that my colleague Cara Hagan spoke about before, which are the amendments to the Income Tax Act to the mandatory disclosure rules. I'm not going to repeat anything that Cara said. I agree with everything that she said, and it reflects the position of the Federation of Law Societies. It is important, however, that I emphasize a couple of things. The first thing I want to say is that we provided you with a written submission on the 25th of April. I commend it to you. It sets out our position more fully. The second thing is that the goals of the legislation are not at issue for us. Don't have a position on them, but it isn't something we would oppose. Cracking down on tax avoidance or tax evasion is a public good, and we would not quibble with that. But we would say that the means that the government adopts to accomplish those goals must be done in a way that is both constitutional and respectful of the principles of fundamental justice that Ms. O'Hagan spoke about. I listened today to the other witnesses here, and I think we have a tough job representing the regulators of lawyers, legal professionals, Quebec notaries, and Ontario paralegals. We don't often get a sympathetic ear. So I want to stress one thing. The principles of fundamental justice exist for the protection of the people of Canada. They don't exist for the protection of lawyers. They are fundamental to our system of justice. Ms. O'Hagan referred to the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada in the case that the Federation of Law Societies brought involving the proceeds of crime legislation. And the judgment makes quite clear, there's some eloquent quotes, some of which are included in our brief, I won't go into them, it makes quite clear that these principles are pillars of our system of justice. So when you consider the position that we are advocating today, that we please keep those matters in mind.
Ms. Wilson, and welcome, and we're glad to have you here. Thank you. So members, we're moving into our second round, and we're starting with MP Morantz, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wilson, most of my questions, if not all, will be directed to you. And I just want to let you know we had two food bank representatives here last night, Mr. Hetherington and Ms. Nichols, and they painted a pretty terrifying picture. Before I get into that picture and ask you about your experiences, I just want to, for the record, say we did vote for the grocery rebate, contrary to statements made at this committee meeting a few minutes ago. But I just wanted you to know that. So Mr. Hetherington in particular, he said a number of really terrifying things. He said, "Let me be clear, we are in a crisis. The Daily Bread Food Bank and food banks across the city are at a breaking point." Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. I would agree with my colleague in Toronto.
Okay. They also said first-time users are at an all-time high. Would you agree with that statement?
We continue to see people who are using food banks who haven't had to use them in many years, as well as newcomers to Canada, as well as new people accessing food banks.
Okay. He said that in Toronto, before the pandemic, there were about 65,000 food bank users a month, and now there are 270,000 users a month. Is that consistent with your experience?
We saw an increase of about 30% over last year, and as I said, 86% over 2019. So our visit numbers are 400,000 a year.
Okay. And the reason I'm pointing this out, because if you listen to government members, they'll tell you, well, Canadians have never had it so good, and look at all the programs we've created. But the reality on the ground, what we've really learned, the real-life reality on the ground is far different. I'll take you through some other things that they said. They said many of their clients pay 100% of their income just for housing. Is that something that you've had any knowledge of or experience with?
We don't have direct numbers about that here, but we do know that the majority of the people that we serve are actually living in private rentals right now because they can't get into affordable housing. So they're spending a significant amount more on housing.
Ms. Nichols said that 5% of Mississaugans use food banks, which I thought was just a stunning number. I'm not asking you if that's the same in Ottawa, but You know, it doesn't sound like Canadians have never had it so good from what I've been hearing. Now, this is an interesting one. Both of them said that the grocery rebate will not help. What's your view of that?
We are always pleased to see when money is put into the pockets of Canadians, and it is really important to ensure that people have access to those funds that directly impact their ability to purchase things when they want and where they want. But we recognize that for the majority of the people accessing food banks, that fund will probably not go towards groceries. It will in fact go towards housing, hydro, and utilities.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Hetherington also rang the alarm bell on the unemployment rate being so low. He said the unemployment rate is next to zero, but food bank usage has never been as high. And he said what keeps him up at night is, what if things go sideways? What if the unemployment rate goes up? What if we slip into a recession? His food bank, he says, will be broke in a year and a half. They are depleting their reserves that fast. So I'm just wondering if you have the same worries.
We absolutely have the same worries. As I mentioned before, the numbers after a recession went up again, and they did not come back from the 2008 recession. So we do have significant concerns about the sustainability of the system right now, where we are serving people 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a month. Some are receiving almost a full month's worth of food. We cannot sustain that at this increased level.
And my last question for you would be, if Canadians had their take-home pay increased a little bit, even just marginally through a tax reduction or something like that, do you think that would help the situation?
More money into the pockets of Canadians is always a bonus, but we do recognize that about 60% of the people accessing food banks here in Ottawa are actually on some form of social assistance.
Yeah. Sorry, I do have one more question. The other thing they said, and this was really stunning on that point, by the way, was that, in fact, they said at the Daily Bread Food Bank, the number of people who derived income from employment doubled from 15% to 33%, the number of people who were using the food bank, in a time when the government's telling us that Canadians have never had it so good. These are working poor who are having to come to food banks. Are you seeing a spike with those people coming as well?
We are, unfortunately. We've seen a 37% increase in the number since 2019.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Morantz. And now we're going to the Liberals and MP Baker, please, for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. I'd like to start with Ms. Wilson with a question, and then if there's time, I'll move to two of the other folks who are with us. Ms. Wilson, I can't help, when I hear untruths spoken, I often have to bite my tongue in this line of work. I can't help but do it in this particular case, where the colleague from the Conservatives several times during the exchange with you suggested that people on the government side are saying that Canadians have never had it so good, and that's not true. And I have to say that for the folks who are watching at home, but also for your sake. I think all of us represent communities where people are struggling, and we are approached for help by those people who are struggling. And we've visited our local food banks, and we know what people are going through. And every colleague, at least on the Liberal side that I know, on the government side, spends a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out and advocate for those things that will help those people. So we're on the same page, but I'm not going to allow untruths to be spoken consistently and to besmirch the reputation of folks who are working really, really hard on the same issues that you're working very hard on and care about. On that note, Ms. Wilson, you said something earlier that I wanted to pick up on in your response to one of the other members when you spoke about, your desire would be to see food banks eliminated. And I think, I certainly share that goal. I think actually Minister Freeland was at the committee the other day, and she said something very similar. So can we talk about that? Like how do we go about doing that?
What we're doing at the Ottawa Food Bank is that we recognize that food is often what brings people to the door. And when they come to a food bank, we need to connect them with other resources and supports in the community that help them move out of poverty. So we have set up programs with wraparound supports with our agencies right across the city that really are about getting people access to employment, language skills, childcare, whatever it may be. And often what we are seeing right now is healthcare and mental health supports. So food banks are truly becoming community-based organizations. We see them as part of the solution to be able to help move people out of poverty.
And that makes a lot of sense. But I think what I'm asking is, and if you don't know, that's okay too. But I do really genuinely welcome your advice, right? I mean, I guess when if you were sitting in my shoes, or if you were sitting in the shoes of the finance minister, like, what are the things we want to eliminate the need for food banks? I think that's what I heard you say, or something along those lines. And so, there's no question that food banks play a critical role and they need to be supported. And I hear you on all of that. I think my question is, if what are the things that we can do to eliminate the demand for food banks? Do you have any thoughts on that?
We know that a guaranteed basic income would support many people. We saw it when CERB came in. We saw our numbers drop off significantly for the number of people accessing food banks. We see it when seniors are able to access that basic income. We see it with families who are now accessing child tax benefits as a basic income. We know that that is the critical piece. It's about income, and we would encourage all government to focus on income-based solutions.
Okay, thank you very much for being here with us today, Ms. Wilson. I believe I still have about a minute or a minute and a half left, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
So, yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. So what I'd like to do is go to the Centrale des Syndicats Démocratiques. Am I correct that there's somebody there from?
There is.
Forgive me, I can't see everybody at the table. I apologize.
Yeah, you can continue, MP Baker. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. So, and I'll switch to French here, but la loi d'exécution du budget.
The BIA is intended to put in programs that will help in the future. Do you feel that that is the case? Will it help you?
If you can repeat the question, MP Baker.
Yeah. In English.
Okay. Am I speaking?
English? In English, yes.
Sure. The Budget Implementation Act provides a doubling of the tradesperson's tool deduction, and will this help your members? And if so, how?
We'll check that and come back.
So, yeah, MP Baker, that's the time, and they're going to come back to the committee with an answer, I guess a written answer for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And now we are going to MP Zamari. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. For Mr. Bissonnette, when you made your presentation, you spoke about the Board of Appeal, but according to C-47, it would require a bill that would be a true mechanism. Now, if I understood what you were saying, you know that has to be done, but there are details as well that have to be taken into consideration. That is, in-person meetings have to be enforced. Can you explain that to us? And can you explain as well the reporting system? Yes, that is what we were trying to say. We are concerned that there is an intermediary who will be reporting to the Commission about the effectiveness of the work done on the board, and that plays to credibility. While we want things to be that way, but we don't know also if resources will be available in all the regions to allow for access to a tripartite Board of Appeal in each and every region. Thank you. Well, As I said, it's important to reform EI so that it covers the needs of everybody. It has to be changed in that way. This is what we were talking about last fall. The consultations occurred, and now in C47, the result is that it really doesn't effectively change anything on the long term. You want to see an improvement. Yes, that's quite it.
MP Saint-Marie. Now,
Thank you, Mr. St. Marie.
Blakey?
Monsieur Bissonnette, à votre avis, est-ce que ça...
In your opinion, Mr. Bissonnette, would it be better to leave the temporary changes to EI in place that were put there as a pilot project? Would that help modernize? Well, yes. What we are very concerned about is the eligibility, the 460 hours. That pilot project was effective, and we really don't understand why it wouldn't be put in place such as it is, as it stood. As I said earlier, the majority of people who are penalized and who have difficulty accessing benefits are women, people who work in pharmacies, people who work in grocery stores, and they just don't have the salary necessary. In your opinion, is it a good idea or a bad idea to have $25 billion of debt from the CERB taken from the EI account? What should the government really do? Well, it's something that has been submitted by the government, and at a certain time, if my memory serves, there was even a larger amount of money that led the government to look to the fund. It was some $63 billion. And with this $25 billion, it comes to some $88 billion that were taken from the EI fund. That's a lot of money. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Blakey. And now we're going to MP Macaulay for 5 minutes. And welcome to our committee.
Thanks, Chair, and witnesses. Thanks very much. I wish I could have a lot more than 5 minutes. Maybe I can grab some of you after. Ms. Wilson, I want to stick with you and chat with you a bit more. First of all, you probably know Marjorie Benz from the Edmonton Food Bank, an absolute gem and such an important part of our city. So thank you for doing very similar work, I guess, as Ms. Benz does. I'm going to zip through some questions quickly. And this is not a jab at a partisan jab, but the rebates, the grocery, lack of better words, the grocery rebate, how do you think we could target it better? The reason I ask, it goes out to about 11 million, but one of my sons receives it. He lives on his own, but he is supported by the Bank of Dad. And I imagine there's a fair amount of young people like that, because we looked at other similar programs benefit like that. The amount of, for example, single parents, I think it was only in the low teens. A lot of others was going to others. How do you think we could better target so those truly in need receive that?
One of the things we do recognize is that often people who are accessing food banks don't have the means to be able to file their taxes, and that's often a hurdle for people. So definitely recognizing that the automatic filing would make a significant difference.
Can I just interrupt on that? Do you think we should do the same GIS for seniors? Because right now, a senior, unless they're filing for the GIS, will not get it, and the government will not pay back more than 11 months. Should we be doing that more as a government?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the reality is that we are not all on equal playing field when it comes to access to technology, to internet, to language skills that are required to navigate through some of the processes required in order to access some of these funds.
How much of the increase are you seeing in seniors visiting?
Recently, actually, let me just check. I believe our senior number actually has leveled off this year. Yes, it's leveled off this year, although we did see a significant increase last year. But this year it's just sort of basically leveled off right now.
Do you know why it might have leveled off? Because it leads into my next question. I want to see if you know what demographic is driving this large increase in demand at the food bank. And it ties into your comment about we need to have more like income-based solutions. Unemployment is effectively almost zero in the city. So if we have a strong, employment base, therefore a strong income base, what is driving such a massive increase? Is it just the near out of control food inflation costs doubled with the housing inflation costs?
That is what we are hearing consistently from people accessing food banks, is that it is the cost of food and it is the cost of housing coupled together that is making it completely unaffordable for families, individuals, and seniors.
Can you guess how much it might be housing driven, how much is food inflation driven?
I don't think I could make a guess, but I certainly could look at that.
But you could say it's a huge amount of it is driven by our housing crisis, our rental price crisis, and the food inflation.
Here in Ottawa, the affordable housing list is about 5 years long with 12,000 people on it. That has to undoubtedly impact people's ability to afford living here.
Oh, yeah. No, I can't imagine here. I know Edmonton, we have more stable pricing, but it's still very, very difficult. Ottawa's now, I think, 50 to 60% higher than Edmonton, so I can't imagine what it's doing for the people here. What about veterans? In Edmonton, we've got a wonderful organization near my office called the Veterans Association Food Bank, and we try and help them out, but it's mind-boggling a country this wealthy has its veterans visiting food banks. Are you seeing an increase of veterans as well?
That's actually not information that we track through our link to feed information, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
How much do you think is mental health driven and perhaps some of the drug crisis we're seeing?
We do have numbers on what is driving the numbers of mental health, and I can submit that afterwards as well.
Oh, wonderful. How much time do I have, sir?
Yeah, 45 seconds.
Great. You mentioned there's a lot more people visiting the food bank who are on support programs. Is that like provincial support programs?
It is. I recognize it's provincial supports.
Do you know what, again, going back to the question, we have almost maxed out employment. What is driving, is it just more it's the same amount who are on provincial support are now coming to you because they just can't live because of the housing and rental costs?
To correct, actually, the number of people on social assistance has remained pretty consistent, but it is 60% of the people who access food banks. Okay. It really is a larger number of people who are employed or who are now becoming unemployed and are on that tipping point of poverty.
Again, driven by rent and food increase. Thanks very much.
Thank you, MP Macaulay. And now we're going to go over to MP Chattel, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. My questions will go to Mr. Bernard and others. I, too, was very happy to see certain measures in the budget. I'm going to personal story. My brother, who is a scientist, is part of the Protection of Animals Alliance, which has appeared before the committee, and so is one of the scientists who has to look at and approve the protocols for the testing on animals in scientific research. These committees are multidisciplinary. There is a veterinary, a researcher that doesn't use animals, one that does, and they do a lot of technical research. It's very stringent in terms of process. She was very happy that her committee refused many tests on animals. So in the budget, and I was reflecting on all the work that is being done by various organizations like yours to protect animals. You stated that the ban on cosmetic animal testing makes Canada a world leader in the alternatives alternative types of testing other than animal testing. So what do you think about the provision in the budget?
We were very happy to see this in the budget. We've been working on it for the past 10 years and working with our colleagues at the Cosmetics Alliance of Canada. I think over the past decade or so, the cosmetics industry has really led the way in phasing out animal testing, and to their credit, they basically do little to no animal testing in Canada at this time. So we're very happy that this industry is moving away from this, and it's happening globally. China is one of the only countries left that still requires some testing on animals, as Darren mentioned earlier in his testimony. I'd also just say Bill S5, the amendments to SEPA, also has a phase out for chemical toxicity animal testing. So this is whenever there's animal testing alternatives in place, they would require that you use those alternatives to animal testing. So it's really nice to see that this package is moving forward altogether.
Mm-hmm. Puis, ce qu'elle met...
Yes. Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you. If I may, just to add to what is a very good question, one of the things that I think we all are going to face with both this and, of course, the SEPA targets that are in the new modernization of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act is when you talk about non-animal testing alternatives, it isn't just a one-for-one, that you have an animal test and now you have another test that replaces it. It's a whole different way of thinking about testing. And we are going to need as a country to develop the regulators, the scientists, the formulators who are well educated and versed in those new methods. And every country that has, I think, successfully implemented a ban has had a center in their country where this is focused. And we're fortunate that we have a center at the University of Windsor in alternative animal testing methods. And they are going to need, I think, all of our support, government and industry, to be able to do the further work, not only in developing alternative methods, but in getting regulatory acceptance for them, which is going to be really critical under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and even perhaps more importantly, training our regulatory staff and Environment and Health Canada, formulators in our industry, and other scientists on how to use those new methods, because they're a very different way of thinking about testing. And as Michael pointed out, often they can produce much better scientific results. So we're on the beginning of what's really a bit of a revolution in the way we think about safety testing.
Merci.
Thank you. Do I still have time?
But we are going into our third round. We won't have time for a full third rounds, but what we will do is divide the time equally that we have amongst the four parties. And so we're going to start with MP Vecchio. Yes. And that's for about 4 minutes or so. Yeah.
Time. Thank you so much, and Rachel, thank you so much for being here. To all of the guests, thank you very much for being here. But Rachel, I want to really stick to you because I know your job must be extraordinarily difficult at this time. I've worked with many of the members in our own local food banks and recognizing the stress. You talked about it was asked about the mental health and addictions piece. What type of, what are you seeing I'm just asking, what are you seeing on the streets? What are you seeing when people come in? And perhaps some of the services that, I don't know if you coordinate with other organizations or try to do that type of work, but partnerships that you've built within our communities.
We recognize that being poor is incredibly harmful to your health. So it is incredibly taxing and stressful to figure out where your next meal is going to come from and having to navigate the systems that are in place at all levels of government to be able to access supports that are needed. One of the critical partnerships that we have is with community health and resource centers here in Ottawa, who play a role in making those referrals and supports and resources for people dealing with health, but also dealing with social assistance and dealing with other social problems that are bringing people to a food bank.
Thanks very much. And I want to go back to also the people that are working. I don't think it's necessarily the working poor that are coming to see you, where they have low wages. What are you seeing when you talk about those double incomes, when you talk about those family incomes? Do you know what that means, might be like, what type of incomes you're referring to when those double incomes, what the family income might be? Like more of the high end that you're seeing?
I would have to submit that. I don't have those numbers with us. But we do know that there are a significant number of people who are well educated, who are employed, and where housing and living in Ottawa is not affordable for many people.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate that. On to the food piece. You were talking about the cost. Are most of your donations, or are most of your funds through donations from the community, or how do you get the money for the food bank specifically?
The Ottawa Food Bank, like most of food banks in Canada, are funded almost entirely by the community and for the community. We get no federal funding, no provincial funding, and we get less than 2% from the municipal government. I mentioned before we are a $25 million organization, so that should give you a sense of the amount of support that we rely on from the community, and clearly the community deeply cares about its members.
How are you doing on the fundraising projects? We're going to just keep on talking, Rachel. How are you making out on the fundraising? Because I think what we're seeing in some communities as well, those people that might normally give are having difficulty. So it's kind of that next generation, the historicals, that are having to give more and more and more. That's what I'm seeing in my community. What are you seeing here?
We are starting to see our fundraising taking a slight dip because we know that many people are struggling to make their own ends meet. We're seeing grocery store donations from the front of the grocery store. So from people who are shopping in grocery stores, we are seeing those dip as well because we know it's that much harder to pick up something extra for people who are at a food bank. So it continues to be very challenging for the organization to continue to meet the needs.
Absolutely. The operating costs, have you seen the operating costs? I recognize the food costs have gone up extravagantly. What have you seen for the operating costs for your business as well? Has that gone up?
We are a living wage employer, so we insist on paying our staff a living wage. So we've seen that increase, of course. The cost of freight, the cost of having items shipped in. We've seen ongoing supply chain issues that are impacted by the cost. We've also had to move into a new facility that is 51,000 square feet compared to 21,000 square feet. We had to rebuild that whole space. The cost of doing that jumped dramatically over the 2 years where we were retrofitting that space. So we're getting hit left, right, and center.
So you needed more space because you have more clients and needing more food. So it's just this vicious cycle.
Absolutely. We knew for years to come that we would need to continue to grow. And unfortunately, we've continued to grow beyond any measure that we imagined.
I think I read somewhere where the food costs had increased by 9.2%. So when you're taking those donations and going out to the stores to get some of those items or partnerships that you have with other people, how far is the dollar going? How many fewer people are you being able to serve with the cost?
We continue to serve everyone who we can that comes to our 112 member agencies. Before the pandemic, we were able to save $5 to one. Oh, I'm being cut off. Okay. We could take $1 and turn that into about $5 worth of food, but we know that is not the same buying power that we have experienced for years. The cost of food is making up about 50% of our total increased costs right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
MP Vecchio, thank you. And now we're going to the Liberals, MP Baker, please.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to ask a question once again of the Centrale des Syndicats Démocratiques. And if you're able to answer this, that's great.
One moment, MP Baker. Yeah, Monsieur Bisonnet, I think the question is for yourself. Yeah, MP Baker.
Thanks, Chair. So the question is, in the budget, there was an announcement of investment tax credits, some of which have labor hooks, including prevailing wage and a requirement that at least 10% of the tradesperson hours worked must be performed by registered apprentices in the Red Seal trades. Are you familiar with this? And if so, how do you think this might support your members, or will it support your members, and so how?
No, we're not really familiar with this, honestly. I cannot answer to your question now.
Okay, merci. So what I want to do then is go back to the to our representative from the Ottawa Food Bank. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you spoke in your opening remarks about how the increase in the use of food banks, and I think we're seeing, you've seen that in Ottawa, but I've seen it in my community in Etobicoke, and I think we're seeing it across the country. What is driving that, do you think? What's causing people to come in to rely on food banks when in greater numbers than they did before?
I think for many years we saw people who were barely making it by, who were able to keep their heads above water, who are now really struggling. The pandemic has shown that it can take a pandemic, a loss of a job, a broken down car that will send people having to use a food bank. So it's all these incremental things together that are causing more and more people to have to access a food bank.
And is there, but I mean, I guess, like, just continuing on that line, I'm not disagreeing with what you've said. I think it's more just like what's astonishing to me is that the number of people has jumped so much so quickly. Like, I mean, so one of the things I'll throw this out and you tell me if you agree with it. I mean, one of the things that I hear from folks in my community is like, look, the cost of food has gone up. The cost of daily essentials like gas has gone up, et cetera. Is it like, to me, that's one of the things I hear from folks who are using food banks or relying on food banks. Do you agree with that? Is like, in other words, is inflation contributing a lot to this challenge, do you think?
Yes, that's what we're consistently hearing is the cost of food coupled with the cost of housing, and then other items such as gas, and factoring in things like childcare makes it really impossible for people to be able to afford to live in a city like Ottawa.
Sure. Yeah, and like my community at Etobicoke, like Etobicoke's a suburb of Toronto, and so we have. You're smiling, so either that means you're very aware, or you're not aware. But either way, I just want to make sure folks at home understand. But so the cost of living in Toronto is very high as well. And so all this to say, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And you just spoke about sort of the cost of childcare. You spoke about a couple of other costs, and I guess that I'll come back to sort of the opening thing I said to you when I asked questions the last time, which is I think that's where my colleagues and I are really focused, right? Is how can we address what's causing those prices to go up to the extent that the government can impact that. So that's everything from the things that are causing inflation, like supply chains, the war in Ukraine, which is causing food and energy prices, all that, those sorts of things, those root causes. But then also trying to provide people with support for those daily essentials, right? And so I know we've talked a lot about the grocery rebate because that's the recent thing, but I don't want to, I think if you look back at all the sort of the target assistance the government's provided over the past 2 years, not just during COVID, but since, it's been designed for those who are the most vulnerable. It's not solving all the problems, and I'm not going to pretend it is, but that's been the focus is like, let's take the resources we can and put them towards helping folks with the cost of living. Childcare, obviously, there's a major change happening there. Dental care. Anyway, all this to say, I want you to know, walking away, that I think I appreciate. We haven't solved all these problems, and we got to do more. But we're really trying, and we're trying to target at those people who are most vulnerable.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Baker, and I will go to the block and MP Sainte-Marie, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question, once again, is for Mr. Bissonnette, but before that, I have a comment from Ms. Wilson. I was really taken aback to know that you have to go out and raise your own funding. You don't have any support. We in Quebec, well, our food banks do extraordinary work, but a good portion of their funding comes from the government. Those food banks seek yearly indexing to the rate of inflation. But they don't always get it, but you really live a different experience. Your reality is different, and so I have to take my hat off to you for the great work that you do. Thank you. Mr. Bissonnette, the first bill that was brought before the House was to catch up the delay there was in putting in anti-scab legislation. We've had that for a long time in Quebec, but and I know that the NDP have proposed that as well. Here now we have the government proposing anti-scab legislation. I don't know if it's the carrot that they want to hold out to people, but what do you think about that? Well, anti-scab legislation is really fundamental. I'm sure I'm not making anybody learn anything new, that the right to organize is a right that is protected in the Charter. The Saskatchewan case before the Supreme Court, and that was since 1975, ensured that right. But there is no provision, no anti-scab provision. So all that has been brought back to the strength of bargaining. In Quebec, we, as you said, have had that for a long time. And I don't know how you can have industrial peace without having some sort of way of enshrining that in the Constitution for Quebec. For us, it would be unthinkable not to have anti-scab legislation. Thank you. Most union representatives go around to the elected members to try to sensitize them to that need. I don't know if you have thought about this particular issue, but with telework, working remotely, it's open doors for the possibility of anti-scab legislation. Let me talk about an example in Joliette, and there was an American firm that was involved in a case before the tribunal. They used scabs in a dispute, but they weren't local. So the employees of the Myanmar hardware store won their case before the Labor Relations Board, but the fact was that the scab work was actually being done remotely. Well, I don't know. We haven't given extensive thought to this new reality. Virtual platforms like that is quite new. We really haven't given a lot of thought to that, but we will have to, because it is a concern when strikes arise, given the fact that we have telework so extensively that this has become a concern. I'm sure that all of us in Quebec will be moving to very quickly think about it. Okay, thank you. Once again, the chairman is gagging me. I'm muzzled. Thank you, Mr. St. Marie.
We're going to go to MP Blakey. MP Blakey, you will be the final questioner of our great witnesses that we have with us here today. And the floor is MP Blakey's now for the next 4+ minutes.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Perkins maybe wanted to ask how many eels are transported by rail from coast to coast over the course of a year. It's a bit of an inside joke for those of us who had to suffer the filibuster. To our witnesses from the rail industry, I wanted to ask, you talked earlier, and we've heard this from other witnesses around the table, about the nature of the contracts that are signed between customers in, say, the grain or pulse industry and railways. Now, my understanding is that, booking of cars can happen up to 2 years in advance, and that railways do make investments and capital plans based on projected demand from those growers or grain companies or whomever it is that you're ultimately dealing with in order to move that product. I'm just wondering what the time horizon is in order to make back the money on that investment, and when you would expect to start to see a return on those on the capital investments you make based on those projections.
If I may, thank you for the question, and Mr. Chair, thank you for having us here at the committee today. It's a privilege to address the committee. I think it really is kind of fact specific, depending on the circumstances with the individual shipper. when we look at service, it comes down to demand, forecasts, visibility, commitments. For CPKC, when we talk about grain, for example, about 90% of the grain moving on our network in Canada is through our dedicated train program, where you've got they're confidential commercial contracts that are in place between the railway and the customer, and that contract defines the capacity that the customer wants to purchase from us. And then there are penalties in place for reciprocal penalties on both parties. So you get accountability, you get discipline. That's really how you maximize throughput on the rail system, efficiency and throughput, because all parties make commitments and are held accountable to them.
I mean, what we've heard around this committee table from those customers of yours is that, that capacity is negotiated, but then not available when they want it or when they need it. From the railway's point of view, how does that relationship working? I understand that you have made investments in order to make that capacity available. Is it the point of view of the railways that you don't have enough capacity in order to be able to meet that demand, or?
I would say, when we're talking about grain, not just CPKC, but our colleagues here from CN, both railways have been breaking records this past crop year for the movement of grain. A lot of that comes back to investment. A huge part of that success story is about investment. We alone have invested $500 million in new high capacity hopper cars in the last number of years. That's what's driving these record volumes moving through Canada's grain supply chain, combined with some operational changes and our 8,500 foot loop train model. We're getting about 40% more grain on every single unit train with those high capacity hopper cars. So that's a huge success
story. Is it a
story.
surprise to you to hear that you have customers here saying that you're not meeting your commitments or you're not satisfying the transportation needs of their industries, given the work you've done with them and the investment that you made in order to be able to accommodate their demand?
I think we've got very good relationships with our customers. There's an enormous amount of collaboration that goes on every single day to make the supply chain work. That's what we need more of. When we talk about...
Sorry, just a quick question. I'm curious, because we do hear, we hear about how government regulation can impact investment decisions. What does it mean for you to have a longer regulated interswitching distance in place in terms of a confidence for the railways to continue to make the capital investments that they've been making in order to move these kinds of products?
It is, extended interswitching is a policy for more rate regulation, cost-based rate regulation. So that undermines our ability to generate revenues to invest. That's not a recipe for success in Canada's supply chains. That's the problem with it. And we are, the rail industry is a very capital intensive industry. We invest about 20% of our revenues into capital every year. That works out to billions of dollars that gets invested into capacity enhancing infrastructure, into safety. Very, very important for the future success of Canada's supply chains.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Blakey, and on behalf of the Finance Committee, all of the members, the clerk, the analysts, the staff, the interpreters. We do want to thank all of you for your advocacy, your strong presentations here before us, and that will help inform your testimony. Will help inform our study. I know some of you, because of limited time, may not have had an opportunity to want to be able to put out some of the information that you would like the committee to receive. What we do ask is that you be able to submit that through the clerk, and you'll be able to get that information to us, so that can also help inform our report. On that note, I want to thank you. Have a great evening, and thank you very much. And everyone, we are adjourned.